Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes. Now, yesterday I put out a video regarding the 4 Dreadnoughts in EVE Echoes as they currently exist as the virtual test interference event. Now, when I did this video, the idea was to look at the 4 ships and how they operate inside that test environment, then to take that and sort of extrapolate beyond as to how they would fit into the universe at large in EVE Echoes, and that's what the final section of the video was for those of you who didn't stick around to the full end of it. Now, I also understand that I didn't word this particularly well in certain cases, and some people seem to have misunderstood some of the points that I was making. So today's video is basically going over the comments that I received both here on YouTube and on Reddit in regards to this video. Some people genuinely did seem to misunderstand what I was saying, so maybe I didn't explain things particularly clearly. Some people technically have gone a little bit misleading off to the side. So what I wanted to do in today's video, in a completely open, honest sort of, this is the process I'm going through kind of thing, was to talk about that feedback, to go over some of those comments and discuss how I feel about Dreadnoughts as a whole, and to clarify some of the points that perhaps I didn't make particularly well. So that's what we're going to do today. So if you see your comment here, don't think I'm picking on you necessarily, and if your comment's not included, it's not necessarily that I thought it was a bad one, it might just be similar to some of the others, but I just wanted to go through these comments and discuss some of the feedback. Now, first things first, before we go any further, the footage on screen is just the same footage that was used yesterday. I didn't just do one test of each of these Dreadnoughts and then call it a day at that, I just only recorded some of the footage. I thought I made that clear in the video yesterday, but apparently not. What you're looking at is just random footage of me flying it. So when people sit there and said, well, of course you sucked with this one because you did this wrong and that wrong, that's not representative. I flew each of these ships probably a dozen times each, and I just can't be bothered now going back through again and doing yet more virtual test interference with ships that I don't enjoy flying, just to get some subtly different footage for today's video. So please understand, the footage in the background is completely irrelevant. It's just something pretty to make YouTube look nice whilst you're listening to me talking. And if you do enjoy this kind of feedback video, it's something I'd like to do a little bit more often, to be open and honest about my creative process and some of the thoughts and opinions I have. Look, I do feature on the spectrum for autism. I know I don't often explain my point. I sometimes don't explain my points particularly well, especially via text. I can come across quite abrasive. I don't mean to. So I thought this would be a nice, interesting way of going over that. Anyway, let's jump straight in on this one because I'm about 3 minutes into explaining what this video is. Let's just actually do it. So I'm going to start with the YouTube comments, and I've got a couple of bits in the back of my head that we'll jump to towards the end of the video. Obviously, there's no timestamps in this one. Now, one of the first things that came up here was people with the revelation and the fact that it's pulse lasers. I genuinely knew that it was pulse lasers. When I was doing the video, I'm sitting there and the word would not come to me, and I ended up saying beam lasers. Of course, the Moros is using snub-nosed railguns, which is the short-range version. The Naglfar is using the short-ranged autocannons. It makes sense that the revelation was also fit with pulse lasers. You've seen this in some of my other videos before. I use lasers fairly frequently. They're one of my favourite systems after cannons in EVE Echoes. I don't know why I still struggle to remember the difference between a pulse laser and a beam laser, and trying to recall at quick notice in a video which one I'm trying to say, so I do often make that mistake. It's been noted. I'm trying to... Yeah, I don't know why that one happens. When I go to say the short-range lasers, my mind just goes, oh, it's a beam laser. Lasers fire in beams, so that's what we're talking about. Yes, I know the revelation is pulse lasers, and I got a lot of people with positive feedback on that one as well, saying that it was one of the better ones to fly during this test, and that is true, because a lot of the ships spawn in at exactly the optimal range of those pulse lasers, so you can do a lot of damage with them very quickly, and pulse lasers do have a pretty good balance between range and activation speed, and their overall damage. I do think the Revelation is going to be a very popular choice when it launches. Here we are, Tom B. Revelation is hands down the best. I played literally hundreds of rounds and the Rev is just flat out better than the others. That said, how is Benzie so obtuse when it comes to dreads? No one is going ratting in a snail. These have one purpose, they can two-shot battleships. Well, the Phoenix can't, but we'll talk about that more later. You know these 500 ship death balls? Well, pop one of these out of Citadel, keep it bubbled, and thin out the enemy. There's absolutely no other reason you would use these. Well, yes, there is. This is my point. People are saying that, oh, you would just bring one of these out to defend a Citadel. No, people want to use them to attack Citadels. But why would you use one of these to defend? a citadel. Like, unless you are taking out another dread, they're not particularly great for that. If you come out in the middle of a 500 ship death ball and it happens to be moving around you, you're not going to hit it with capital weapons. Dreadnoughts specifically are useful for taking out other capital ships and citadels. That is the only thing that they're going to do. But people are going to want to rat with them because no one wants to invest so heavily into a ship that only gets pulled out when you are taking out enemy dreadnoughts and citadels. It is a very expensive ship and as it stands has very little use. And we'll come back to that later on. I just wanted to jump that one in right there. Blaster Master says capital ships are going to add to the downfall of Echoes. I don't think Echoes is in a downfall at the moment, and I don't think capital ships are going to suddenly accelerate that. I just don't think they're going to do anything to help it either. They're not going to help make the game overly better because of that incredibly niche use, and again, we'll talk about that more later. Now, someone with a Hunji name, I can't pronounce that, I can't read that, I'm terribly sorry, asks, does the flagship have insurance? And this is a question that a lot of people have been asking, or at least been sort of commenting on of, I hope they don't, I hope they do sort of thing. I'm in both camps on this. Now, look, I get it. If you sit there and say, well, if the capitals don't have insurance, then that means when they're destroyed, it's going to cost a lot of ISK and that to bring it all back, and that's good for industry. Yeah, but no one's going to build them if they can't be insured. Like with citadels, these are incredibly expensive ships, and you don't want to sit there and skill into... Look at the Yunjung. Look at the Yunjung. The main reason that nobody skills into the Yunjung ships and to decomposers is because there are two ships that use them and they're not particularly good, but equally, even for like PvP and stuff like that, once it's gone, if those modules don't come back with insurance, it's impossible to replace. The rigs are super expensive for these as well, so if you're like building one of these and you just can't get it back, you're not going to skill into something that you can't reliably, repeatedly use, and the same goes for dreadnoughts. If you were to skill into a dreadnought, which we'll talk about later, and purchase a dreadnought, and then know that you could, if you lose it, that you're going to have to buy the whole thing again from scratch, no one's going to use them. Really, no one is going to use them. They're going to become the exclusive domain of the ridiculously rich, at which point, why bother adding them to the game for maybe 100 people to use them? It's a double-edged sword. The idea is that if you make them something that can be insured, then more people are going to want to have them, which means you get more industry up front, and hopefully we can find fixes to the insurance system that will then help industry rebuild some of these and to recuperate costs via the insurance system later. I don't think making them uninsurable is the right way to do it. I just think insurance needs tweaking to make it worthwhile, and I also think that the actual ships themselves, I've said this so many times, should cost a lot more in ore than they are in ISK. Ore should be the biggest barrier to building one of these, not the ISK cost. Anyway, let's keep going up. Managed to win with the Phoenix, had 3 ballistic, 2 shield hardener, 2 bats and a shield rep, did 212k damage per volley, says Kevin Overtough. Only MP ship I could hit was the Phoenix on wave 3. Yeah, that's kind of the point with the Phoenix, and this is going to be a running theme as we talk about the Phoenix. My problem with it, I'm well aware, a lot of people commented, well, of course you sucked with the Phoenix because you didn't understand it. I understood it completely. I even say in the video, this is an incredibly tanky dreadnought killer, and it is only good at killing capital ships and citadels. Now, dreadnoughts as a whole are basically going to be designed just for that role of killing capital ships and killing citadels. The issue is that the Phoenix only does that. If you are in the Moros or the Revelation or the Naglfar, you also have the possibility of applying your damage to other ships as well. So if you get jumped en route or whatever, or you need to go more defensive, you can undock one of these and use it as a defensive thing to blap enemy ships within reason. You can't do that with the Phoenix. The Phoenix is only good at killing citadels and other capitals, which takes an already niche class of ships and makes it even more niche on that one particular hull. That's my problem with the Phoenix. If you want something that can take out just citadels, and if you want something to take out a citadel or another capital, then all 4 of the dreadnoughts can do that. But if you want I don't get why you would go for the Phoenix when all the other dreadnoughts can still take out capitals and citadels, but can also take out other friendly ships. That was the point I was trying to make here. Lots of this in the test. The key to the Phoenix is to survive to wave 4, says Porentellus. Get the tank you need to survive the first 3 rounds, kill the Rat Phoenix on wave 3, then just wait. Yeah, that's how you can win with the Phoenix, and it does really excel at being a capital killer, but the fact that it can only do that is my problem. Let's keep having a look. I can only see them working to take down carriers, says Mr. Majestef. But we will have to see how the carriers will be. Perhaps we'll see 2 big cap fleets dishing things out. Yeah, then Matt Minart says we need carriers in the test. I do get the feeling that we will get a carrier test as well. I get the feeling that we're going to have 2 weeks of virtual test interference using the Dreadnoughts, and then we'll get a couple of weeks testing out the carriers before they launch as well. And carriers do interest me a bit more because they have a bit more versatility and use to them. I still don't think they're necessary, but hey, there we go. I'm not going to sit on that one too long. Let's keep going. I'm forgetting jump drives, says Ronald Zamozadix. Dreads can be jumped in fleet fights, no need to go through gates. I'm not forgetting. I'm really not forgetting at all. I complained that Dreadnoughts ultimately were very much themed around PvP only and being fleet only, and that doesn't help that yeah, now you need someone to go and light a Cynosure beacon so that you can jump to that. I'm not a big fan of hot drops. They are an something that is very difficult to counter. I almost said uncounterable, and I could hear people arguing in the comments, oh, there are counters. Yes, very difficult to counter Cynosural fields. We were talking about this in the Yanjung engine thing as part of last week's dev Q&A, but the ability just to completely negate scouting, do a log-off trap. Do a log-off trap, sneak in when it's nice and quiet, drop a Cynosural field when no one's around, then suddenly you can log in and your entire fleet is however many systems away. That, to me, has been something I have never liked about Cynosural fields and jump drives since EVE Online, and that doesn't look to be getting any better here. So I'm not forgetting about that. It just doesn't fix any of the problems, and it actually causes all new ones, but hey, we'll go to that. Let's keep looking up. When I made it to the final wave, the Phoenix won a lot. If they add HAWs, then Phoenix will be good. Yeah, possibly, but again, releasing something with the hope that it gets fixed later just doesn't feel like the right way to go for me. Here we have a brilliant comment from Legendary, spelt in capitals and lower cases with a 1 for the letter I. While I don't mind these ships being included, I really want to see the Tristan, Maulus, Rifter and Crucifier hulls shown some love from NetEase. I mean, come on, man. I'd settle for a T7 or T8, one can dream version of any of these hulls. They're really well designed and iconic. Ugh, I can rant on for days, but that's my 2 cents. And yeah, I kind of agree with that. I really agree with that. And today's video was actually going to be a 5 things I would rather see than capitals kind of video, which if enough people comment and say they'd like it, yeah, I'll do it. I don't mean that as a way of like crapping all over the capital ships, but just people have been asking, well, you keep saying that capitals, there's other things you'd rather see added first. What other things would you like to see added? There's a whole list, and I would rather do that as a separate video if people are interested. Keep looking on here. The mass increase matters for inertia. Yes, this was something I was wrong about. Preston Hooser caught me on this perfectly. When I did the video, I talked about how showdown mode massively increases your mass, and I'm like, why does that even matter when you've got no movement? Yeah, he says if you're moving already, you won't slow down for minutes after switching, and that is a very good point. Come out of showdown mode, put yourself onto like an orbit or trajectory or something, then reactivate showdown mode, and you will actually keep that speed for a long time, despite the fact your flight velocity returns to 0 because of how mass and inertia work. It's actually a really good point, a point that I missed, so well done Preston Hooser for that one, thank you very much, and to anyone else who pointed it out later, of course. More about the Phoenix in the comment section. Here we are. Mors Magne says, I'd rather NetEase develop wormhole space and exploration than capital ships. I'm never going to fly a capital ship because they're too expensive and slow. And I completely agree with that. That's why I don't like capitals either. But again, I say I just don't see the need for capitals, and we'll talk about that more later on in this video towards the end. I think things like exploration and wormhole space would be more interesting because it benefits a larger group of players, and it's content that we could actually sorely do with. People are getting bored of just ratting endlessly for PvE. Exploration as it currently stands is utter trash. So adding fixes and new things to that, I think, would be much more important than adding capitals. But yeah, maybe that is just me. Dreadnoughts are there to absorb damage and return it 100-fold, nothing else, says SD344-00098. I disagree, because if that were the case, then they'd be able to hit everything. They're not. They're not there to absorb damage and return it 100-fold. They are there to kill dreadnoughts, capital ships, and citadels. Capital ships and citadels, that's what dreads exist to kill. And how many people are actually killing citadels and capital ships? Okay, obviously no one's killing capital ships right now because they're not in the game, but the addition of dreadnoughts implies that we're going to have a lot of capital ships to kill, and that's simply not the case. Ashley Cross has an excellent point here. Can't wait to fit capital missiles to the Hound 4. Yeah, that would be amazing. Although, admittedly, the Hound 2 and Hound 3 are problematic enough that I kind of think we need to fix those before we add more. So many things that could be balanced out, or quality of life improvements over adding shinier ships, says Gigabyte717. Like, take the fact at Tech 6 you can train the strip mining skill, and at Tech 7 you could fly a Retriever if it weren't locked behind a Mega Status. Now, I'm perfectly fine with leaving Retrievers at a Mega Status, but a buddy of mine trained to rank 5 strip miners thinking he could strip mine as an alpha and just wasted those training points. Yeah, I kind of believe here that I get this. Why would you have Tech 6 skills for a Tech 7 only ship that is locked behind a Mega? I kind of, there's a part of me that says, well, your friend should have been checking to see if he could fly the ship that he wanted to before making that investment, but equally, I know how much it sucks. Like, I get that. But anyway, we're kind of off topic there. I just thought that was an interesting point. Keep going. Lots more people talking about the purpose of Dreadnoughts and why I was wrong with the Phoenix, which I've already covered. Here we have Salvador Hardin. The purpose of Dreadnoughts is to keep the money flowing into NetEase's coffers. They're designed to provide another tier of shiny content for those players who already own everything else in the game, giving them a new reason to keep grinding skills, ISK, and paying NetEase. I'm going to stop here and massively disagree with this. I think there are so many more meaningful things you could add that people would still go for. I don't think that... When Dreads come out, yeah, people are going to dump a load of money into the game for Plex and that to buy them and to respec and all of that kind of thing. But that's the point. They're going to respec. And with the amount of skill points that I reckon these capital skills are going to take up, they're not going to be able to fly anything else. And I think that is damaging because those people are going to get there, go, actually, Dreadnoughts really suck. They are niche for what they do. Ultimately, at the end of it all, they're going to respec into this, buy this ship, be disappointed, and then come out of it because there's not really any purpose to Dreads as it currently stands. I don't think that NetEase are just going, oh, we want big and shiny because it's going to make us money. It's not. It's really not. It's going to cause actual big problems, I think, more than anything. That said, at a certain point, they will also become a necessity for the rest of us too, says Salvador Hardin, because ultimately they'll become a big force projector in PvP engagement. I'm really not sure they are there either, because people will still fly battleships, and 5 battleships right now will comfortably take out a Dreadnought in a cost-effective manner. Which means, why would you skill into something as heavy as Dreadnoughts that can only do one particular thing, when you can still be taken out by battleships that can also do other things? And that's the point we'll come to in just a moment. There's other comments here about the Phoenix. You didn't even target the Rat Phoenix. How can you get to the last PvP stage? Because I did it many other times. That was just one video. Voxel actually put here, as you can see in my current video, testing them in a real environment, testing them in the faction warfare is a bit misleading because those ships are scripted or nerfed to the ground, means those damage numbers are misleading. Yeah, the damage numbers wasn't what I was caring about. The damage numbers, as I've mentioned, are already scaled for faction warfare. Faction war games there, because you have no skills in Dreadnoughts. You have no actual fitting or rigs to those Dreadnoughts. I'm expecting this to scale somewhat accurately, that people will come out of this with something like a Moros and go, okay, that was really quite powerful, and they'll skill into it, and if they skill into it and fit it properly, then perhaps it will come out on par with that kind of effect as we saw in the game. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to say, and this leads quite nicely, as a lot of other people mentioned here, that I didn't cover the fact that the ships all have different bonuses. I didn't talk about how these are going to work, why the fact that they have, like, you know, bigger shields or different things, different skill bonuses on them. If you open up the hull and actually look at the roll bonuses and things like that, I didn't talk about any of that because right now, Dreadnoughts only exist in a test. which means they are subject to change. And I will do a video when they actually get a proper version where I talk about the stats and the differences and what the different Dreadnoughts do and why you might want to fly one of them over the other, like I've done for things like the Tech 10 battleships and that in the past. That is content that is definitely coming. Anyway, let's move over to Reddit now, because here I have some of the bigger questions here. Someone says here, X5P4RTN, so X-Spartan. The problem with capitals in this game is that nothing in nullsec is worth fielding them. Alliance Wars at this point is strictly just player content with no fruitful rewards. If moons could be mined in null, and if regions were resourcefully rich, and if null market worked like it did in EO, absolutely capital ships would be worth it and necessary. As it stands, this game resource-wise lacks any real reason to field fleets of capital ships, and I wholeheartedly agree. I loved flying my Nyx, he continues, and I loved flying an Avatar in EVE Online. Being a capital super capital ship pilot in major conflicts was amazing and the stakes were always high, but with the lack of meaning and resource grabbing that null currently has, I see absolutely zero place for capital ships practically, and 100% I agree with this. This is what I've been saying. Right now, all you can do with a capital ship is blow up someone else's capital ship, or go and attack a citadel. And if you attack that citadel, what do you actually gain? Maybe with Entosis links you steal that citadel from them, but that doesn't really net you anything, other than a little bit more sovereignty. It changes the map colour. That's literally it. That is literally it. You're not getting more resources or better resources or things that you needed before. There's nothing in nullsec really that we're actually fighting over right now. So I don't get why you would want something added to the game that is all about big nullsec wars. Yes, we've got a war going on at the moment, but what is actually going to come from that? People are just blowing up ships for the fun of it, and that in itself is admirable, and I kind of agree with that. I think ships are fun to blow up. But at the end of the war, no one's really gained anything, just they've had fun in the time being. It's literally like kids getting their action men and just slapping them together, and at the end of it they've had fun, but nothing meaningful has come out of it, and that's very much where we are with capitals and nullsec sovereignty in EVE Echoes. Now, another point here starts with CraigieBoy99. I managed to get through the waves with the Caldari ship against sub-capitals. It's really poor once you start hitting other dreads, 180k damage from those missiles, and the range chef kiss. And yeah, I get that. BHTA Elite Pun then responds, yes, Captain Benzie, I feel like you really missed the mark with this video. Rev, if you would, Revelation, if you would have actually activated striker mode right away, you'd have killed every single wave, easily. Well, yeah, again, this wasn't the only, the footage is not representative of the final thing. I didn't just run that Revelation once, as we saw there. I ran it 100 times, well, not 100 times, probably about 10, 11 times, to get that idea there. Phoenix. This thing 2-3 shots the enemy Phoenix, and after that you're going to be the deadliest ship on the grid for round 4. Pure anti-capital ship as it's intended. That being said, the good players can cycle mods like the damage control easily to catch missiles and render it useless. Also, I didn't speak about ship bonuses. I've already covered this. I didn't speak about those because I'm kind of expecting them to possibly change. I want to do a video once we know for certain what the ships are actually going to launch like. For example, the Phoenix has an insane shield. Why would that be? It has additional shield resistances. Might be even better once people skill into them. Exactly that. As he says here, I would have loved to know if the test has been overcompensated for the lack of player skill, as this is not something that's evident from playing a few rounds yourself. I wholeheartedly believe it is. That's why the rats die so easily, because you don't have any skills into these. If you were to pick up something like, just off the top of my head, someone sent you a Macariel in the mail and you've got no battleship skills and you've got no large cannon skills, it's terrible. It's not going to be at all representative of the final thing itself once you've skilled into it. So what they've done is basically nerf the other rats that appear so that they kind of give you a more representative feeling of what's going on. Unlike the other videos that you put up, he says, I think this barely covers the tip of the iceberg. And would love to see more in-depth and revised video of this one. And yes, I agree, I intend to do that just once we actually have proper stats and I can sit down and look at those and do my usual math and work things out. Like mentioned before, go into depth with the ship's specific bonuses, can mean if you use your range weapon variant instead of the ones that come with the test, i.e. rifled over snubs, and what can it mean for the current meta in the case you'd pick ship X over ship Y. This is coming from someone who watched and really valued your vids for the past new concepts. And yes, again, that is content that I'm working on. I've already got screenshots of all the skills as they currently stand and all the stats. It's all written out in my Silent Rose notebook. But I just don't want to put that out and then a day later NetEase go, here's the final stats for the Dreadnoughts, and everything's changed like it did when I did the Tech 10 videos. I'm being a little bit more conservative at this point to make sure that the content is up to the quality that I expect of myself and you guys expect from me. I do respond to him here and saying, please don't focus on the footage, they're just the videos that I got of the runs, they're not the only runs I did. And I was mainly looking at how they work in Wargames mode, and I'll be covering that later. Then Tommy Truck says to me, and this is where things get a little bit lengthy, I'm going to chalk up some of your commentary up to the fact that 1, you've not participated in some of the hours-long battles in the current war, 2, you're not an FC of large fleet engagements, and 3, you've not really looked at upgraded Citadel HP. This isn't me smack talking you, by the way. No, I actually thank you for pointing that out. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit autistic, I am on the spectrum, and I do struggle to see meaning in intent in text specifically, so I can often misread what someone has written to me as being overly aggressive, and sometimes I type back and I appear overly aggressive. I don't mean to. I genuinely don't mean to be aggressive in most of my comments and things like that. I'm just not great at writing that out. Anyway, the first point that he mentioned, that I've not participated in some of the hours-long battle in the current war, that's correct, I haven't. This is due to my connection being unable to cope with both the game and necessary voice comms, and if you saw my Freighter Raid stream, or technically the lack thereof, you'll understand how that works. Or doesn't. That said, a lack of personal participation doesn't stop me from understanding, analysing, and being able to extrapolate information. Murray Walker, for example, was never a Formula 1 driver himself, but he knew the sport perfectly. Same with many of the top commentators for other sports like football, baseball, basketball. They may not have ever been professional level players themselves, but that doesn't mean they can't understand how the game operates and theorise and extrapolate data based on that. Number 2, you're not a fleet commander of large fleet engagements. Correct again, but at sea above. I've done so in the past. I'm still able to analyse without being able to do that. 3, I've not really looked at upgraded Citadel EHP. Now that is incorrect. I do actually even mention in the video that upgraded Citadels increase the damage cap, therefore Dreadnoughts theoretically have a use there because they're not just blasting through that cap anymore, they actually do hit the higher cap, which is important. The thing is, and I'm going to be reading my response here, the thing is none of this overly matters. My issue is thus. Whilst war is absolutely the central point of EVE's universe and a core part of its gameplay systems, it is not the primary occupation of the majority of the player base. We know this from NetEase themselves. Ratting is the main thing. Yes, I understand that the primary purpose of a Dreadnought is PvP warfare, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. Dreadnoughts are going to be very expensive. I expect that they will be more than freighters due to their Tech 10 constraint. Basically, compare a Tech 9 battleship to a Tech 10 one in cost. Now, extrapolate that from freighters to dreads to get an approximate cost. So whereas like a battleship might be 400 million at Tech 9, it's 1.6 billion, so 1.6 billion at Tech level 10. Do that same kind of growth from how much a freighter costs at Tech 9 to what a Dreadnought is going to cost at Tech level 10. It's only rough, but it gives us a vague idea of how much these are actually going to cost. These are going to be, hands down, the most expensive ships in EVE Echoes in terms of ISK, and unfortunately they do this without consuming all that much ore either, based on how much ore components take to craft, and we've got that information in-game now. Anyway, capital skills are also going to be exceptionally expensive. If we just look at how small weapon upgrade matches medium weapon operations in skill points, and again, medium weapon upgrade is the same as large weapon operations, this would follow that capital weapon operations will be as skill point intensive as large weapon upgrade, and then capital weapon upgrade will be even more so. So like capital, basically looking like capital cannon operation will be equal in skill points to large cannon upgrade, and then that will scale up even further for capital cannon upgrade. Now, compare how skill point consumption increases between cruiser skills to battle cruiser skills, and then battle cruisers to battleship skills. We can then give an approximate extrapolation on how this will be for capital hulls. I've not actually run the math here, but you can figure that out. Plot those on a graph and see how that actually increases. Now, this high cost of hull and high cost of skill works for battleships because they're varied enough to fulfill multiple roles. If you are skilled into battleships, you can do PvE, you can do PvP, you can do solo content, you can do fleet content. Dreadnoughts, however, do not get that luxury. As such, in order to skill into Dreadnoughts, you are expecting someone to drop a whole ton of skill points and ISK into a ship that they only get to pilot during very explicit and niche circumstances. And considering how much I estimate those skill points to be, you're pretty much going to have to dump everything you are into these, which means suddenly you are a Dreadnought pilot. You cannot fly anything else effectively. You're going to be just in Dreadnoughts, which then completely alienates you from any content that is not Dreadnought based. Now, as such, to skill into Dreads, you are expecting them to drop a whole ton of skill points and ISK into a ship that they can only get to pilot during very explicit and niche circumstances. And we have two comparisons to make here: logistics and destroyers. Now, logistics is another role that's very niche and requires investment that doesn't help in any other way. You do logistics skills and they only help you when you are a logistics pilot in a fleet. You can't solo with that. You can only use it in those fleets. However, logistics, I would argue, is still more versatile than Dreads because you can use it in both PvE and PvP, and it does require significantly lower skill point investment, as if you're already flying cruisers or battle cruisers, all you're doing is adding remote shield boosting or remote armor repairing. That's the only skill you have to add in order to fly a logistics vessel. This means that players still earn the cost back through bounty ticks and loot via PvE. You don't earn bounty ticks or loot in a Citadel raid, which is what Dreadnoughts are basically aimed at right now. Destroyers are another very niche ship class, but I'm primarily considering interdiction use, as it's comparable as I can get to Dreads. It's a specific role that's only used in PvP fleets. Now compare the amount of skill point requirement for destroyer skills, engineering, command, defense, weapons, to capital skills. People are already reluctant to skill into destroyers for such a niche role as just flying a destroyer interdictor. Now, why do we think they'll be happy to do so for Dreads? Right now, 5 battleships will do the same job as a Dreadnought, cheaper in ISK and allowing players more versatility in the content that they can achieve. The only use that Dreadnoughts really have, even in their own niche use, is if you don't have 5 players to pilot those 5 battleships. Otherwise, in EVE Online, Dreads are a very different beast. There's PvE content that people use Dreadnoughts for as well. We don't have that in EVE Echoes. Adding Dreads to EVE Echoes right now is adding a very expensive ship, both in terms of ISK and skill points, for an incredibly niche use. I'm worried that players will skill into Dreadnoughts, buy the ships, and find that they never really undock them. And you may sit there and go, oh, poor whales, but that is a really bad experience, because if that whale has a bad experience, drops all that money, and then just goes, okay, that sucks, I hate this, they quit the game. They don't just go, oh, well, I'll drop that all again to reverse the situation. They just feel burned. They quit the game and they're gone, which means rather than getting a small bit repeatedly, you get one big lump, and then that's it, gone. It really does strike me as like the Yanjung situation. The reason that nobody really skills into Decomposers is because there's nothing you can do with it. It's a dead end, and that is exactly where Dreadnoughts fit in my mind. They are a dead end, skill point and ISK-wise. You are going to dedicate a character into flying Dreadnoughts, and then that character is suddenly incapable of doing anything other than taking out enemy Dreadnoughts and taking out Citadels, neither of which are particularly lucrative, let alone a common thing in the game right now. So that's why I don't think Dreadnoughts are really worth it. Now, this is a long video. We're looking at coming up on 34 minutes here of me talking about this. Again, I've gone on a bit long about this one. This isn't as long as I didn't want it to be quite this long, but I did want to just go over some of the comments and feedback that I've received in regards to my video on Dreadnoughts and just clarify a few points, and I hope that I've managed to do that in this video. And if you enjoy this kind of feedback and me just talking about a video I've done previously, this is something I may do again in the future, maybe as like a weekend video, rounding up some of the week's comments or stuff like that. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Otherwise, folks, thank you for listening to this one right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!